Ann McKay Thompson. I'm on the board of the South Dakota Hall of Fame and a former inductee. And we're here today to talk with Dr. Robert Arnio, who was a 2023 inductee in the field of medicine and psychology. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, what we're doing today is talking about your inspiration for things you accomplished in your own personal journey. So Let's start off right at the beginning. Was there a defining moment in your career that was really pivotal to your success?
Well, probably a couple. One, I'm the seventh of 11 children from a working class family. I never had planned on going to college. When I was in high school, I had no idea I would. Eventually, through the influence of my girlfriend, now my wife, for over 56 years, I thought I would give college a try, and I really enjoyed it. I was in some classes in psychology and found them to just be fascinating and thought, wow, do you think I could actually spend my life doing this type of thing? Mm-hmm. And so that was quite inspirational. I also then had a phenomenal mentor, as many, many people at Black Hills State College did, Dr. Walter Higbee. And Dr. Higbee introduced me to the area of psychology and applied practice. We worked on research studies with kids, with diverse populations, and he encouraged me to go on then into school psychology. So that was probably a pivotal career because I was attending college. I enjoyed it, did not know where I was going to go. He gave me tremendous direction and was a wonderful role model.
Well, what inspired you from that moment on through your career then?
I went originally in school psychology, and I worked for 4 years as a school psychologist to make changes within school systems. And then I was given an opportunity to go back and get my doctoral degree. And then I was able to get that into clinical psychology. So once I had that opportunity, although it wasn't most well-planned out timing, I was married and we had 2 children. But I knew if I didn't go back at that point, I probably wouldn't be able to. And so I got my doctorate in clinical psychology and then wanted to work in community mental health centers and work on the community mental health problems, and I was able to accomplish that. So that was the second kind of inspiration in my doctoral program.
Oh, wow. It started early then, didn't it? Well, we have found out that most people that are inducted into the Hall of Fame have had some really significant challenges that they've had to overcome. And then there's a strategy generally with how you got over that. Do you have any really big challenges you had to face?
Well, probably more perception than challenges. Being from a large family, most of whom had not gone to school beyond high school, I had a perception that wouldn't be me. And then secondly, how would I do it financially? And so what happened is I began a philosophy of saying, okay, what does I want to do? If I think I can't do it, why can't I? And challenge that belief system. So I worked in mines at night, went to school in the daytime, and then was given the support through grants because I was able to get good grades from federal programs that helped students at that time. And so I was able to overcome that perception. And then when I began to do other things in my career, people would say, well, it's a big problem, but there's not much we can do about it. And I would say to myself, well, wait a minute. If we were going to do something about it, what would it be we're going to do? And often then logical kinds of steps would follow.
So you basically overcame challenges with a formula, sounds like, a thought formula.
A thought process of, well, why can't I? Well, why can't we? Well, what would we have to do that? Because otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to make the changes and wouldn't have ended up in a career that I absolutely loved and doing what I wanted to do. So there's an old saying which has some truth to it. I don't think I've ever worked a day in my life, okay, because I enjoyed it and saw good things happen, particularly when I was able to work with other groups and other people. There's a book, I think its title is Everything I Know I Learned in Kindergarten, Everything I Need to Know. And he talks, and there's something about when we go into the outside world, we need to join hands and hold hands together. We need to help other people. So after graduate school, up through graduate school, I learned how to kind of do things to help individuals. But it was then working with the community, with other agencies, mental health centers, other counseling groups, other medical groups, that we were able to work together and make systemic changes within very important areas.
I remember when you were coming to the capital city in Pierre, and you were working with the legislature to really change some dynamics in your field. Can you go through just a tiny bit of what that was?
Well, that was precipitated by tragedy. We had a series of suicides, what's called a suicide cluster of adolescents. And we began to say, well, what can we do about this? It's a very complex problems. So I began to work with school systems, and I began to work with counselors and mental health individuals. But one of the things we ran into is we found that people didn't want to talk about suicide among young people at that time. In fact, some people had the idea, if you mentioned it, you might give them the idea. So don't talk about it. Oh, and so nothing was being done. Then we found out that even if you wanted to do something, mental health coverage and insurance was minimal. And I heard parents saying things like, well, when we talked to an insurance agent, they said to me, nobody in the family is crazy, are they? Because you won't need this mental health rider. And so what happened is that we went to the legislature, and our national association came to South Dakota and used as an example state to say, no, basic kinds of coverages need to occur because parents could see kids who are depressed, who are having other problems, but any kind of assistance was not available to them. So we made changes within the state law. It took several years for that to happen. And I do some consulting now, and I'm working with a school district, helping them catch up on some of the psych testing they need to do. So this week I was out at the school, and this week is National Adolescent Suicide Awareness Week. And now what I saw was announcements in the morning about suicide, about depression, numbers people can call, support people. So that was the beginning that we worked on and made some changes with many, many other people. And I was very gratified. I went out there and thought, wow, when we started, you couldn't talk about this subject.
And that was really a significant cultural change in the whole state.
Yes.
And it's paying off, it sounds like.
Well, and it's a nationwide thing, and particularly with the new pressures. I mean, adolescence has always been a difficult time, but with social media and the other things that are out there, the problems have just mounted so by such a multiplicity of factors that I just thank the Lord that we were able to do what we did to get at least some head start on this problem. Without that, I'm not sure what we would do. Oh, wow. So the kinds of things we did were driven by a specific need, by a specific issue that what we need to do something about this.
And then your attitude was an open-mindedness to look at solutions.
Yes, when I met with the schools, they said, well, we'd like to do something about this, but we were trained in the 50s and the 60s, and we don't have training in this. And that's a very legitimate point. So we worked and got a hold of universities and brought some of the best universities, University of Minnesota, Beck Depression Institute, and so forth, to do workshops for school personnel and medical personnel. And we did this for 13 years, had an annual workshop. And some of the workshops were funded by the University of Minnesota, which were free. One, we had 450 individuals there, 450 school and medical people, teaching them the latest kinds of things about what we could do for prevention. And so the need was there, and once we were able to start it, it just kind of rolled out.
And that's why you're in the Hall of Fame.
Well,
it's pretty impactful. So what, with your legacy, what would you say your legacy is?
Well, I hope my legacy is that people who become aware of me look at me and say, well, here's a person who didn't have any idea when he was an adolescent of what he was going to do, had pretty much a stereotyped idea he would do what had always have been done within his family and culture, but found through the input of people like Walter Higbee and other mentors that many things are possible. And that even though we are not sure how to handle complex problems, if we work together, then we can make an impact far beyond anything we would imagine when we were younger. I hope people understand that locus of control, that you can begin to do something, you can make a difference. Particularly now.
Is this the advice you give to youth that want to follow your footsteps?
Yes. What would you like to do? How might you go about that? Why not you? Why can't you do that? So that on an individual level, but on a group level to work together. You know, we're at a very difficult time. Well, our country is so divided, and the families can't even sometimes talk at dinner about their political views. I've never seen anything like this. And yet, the types of things that have happened through the Hall of Fame, people coming together saying, look, we are going to pay attention to individuals who have worked together, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of the other differences. They have more things in common. They work together for the common good. So knowing that you can do something individually and seeing the need, the absolute imperative need to work with others towards that goal, and have that be your primary focus without letting other static of other things that make you different get in the way.
Mm-hmm. You really have to stay focused to make sure that doesn't happen, right?
It's hard to stay on track.
So we've already talked about your key mentor and some advice you'd give to the young people. Talk about how your work really contributed to the state of South Dakota. And you talked about changing some laws to make that happen. Is there anything else you'd add to that on what you changed for the state?
Well, there's a somewhat of a sequence. The laws were changed in one respect to allow insurance coverage. But in order to do that, you have to make sure that the people who are going to provide that are qualified and know what they're doing. So another set of laws came through in terms of licensing. And I and a social worker sat down and wrote the licensing law for social workers. We worked with the American Psychological Association for psychologists and for counselors. There's a group that's changed names a couple times that I had begun, and I think it's called the Interagency Council now, where we got together, where I got a hold of I was head of the Psychology Association at that time, so I got a hold of the counselors, the social workers, the marriage and family therapists, the mental health centers, and we all sat down and said, how can we all work together on legislation that's not designed to further the needs or wants of the psychologist or the social workers or the counselors, but the people of South Dakota? And how do we work together on that type of legislation? And we would meet in the summer and we'll hammer things out, differences, and say, okay, this is a bill we can present to the legislature. And from my information, no bill that was okayed by the interagency had any problems in the legislature, and any bill that wasn't okayed by it didn't get through. And so what we were able to do is to get all of the groups to work together, improving the qualifications and the training, which then allowed insurance companies to say, all right, this will make sense, this will save us money in the long run, because we'll avoid hospitalizations and other catastrophes. So there were two sets of legislation that needed to occur. But that working together, all the groups coming together for a common purpose.
Do you know, you really made a difference, a very grassroots difference. And did you ever use anything that was creative or innovative in that whole process of all your change that you made? Was there a creative aspect to any of that you could share?
Well, I'm not sure how you define creativity, but part of it, I think, was demonstrating that some of these things can occur. For example, when we had the group of adolescent suicides, no one had set up workshops. I actually made financial commitments to the universities for the time that the people would spend their expenses, et cetera, and just funded that. from my own pocket. Nobody knew if it would work. And going out and doing that, if we had waited for grants, it would have taken 4 or 5 more years to put all this together, et cetera. And working together as a group is a very important thing, but when there's an immediate need, doing things that had never been done seemed to make more sense. There's a saying that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Well, some of the things we create together, the long-term major impacts, but sometimes you just have to get it done, and you have to do it quickly. And that's how those things came about. And it was a matter of actually maybe a couple of months from start till we had the first workshop.
Well, the innovative thing here is you paid for it yourself instead of waiting.
Yes.
I mean, there are lots of different ways to do things, and you took this by the tail.
Well, and the need was there, so I got my money back when people, because it was a fee for service, okay? So they paid to attend. But I've sometimes joked and said, if I would have taken this concept to any kind of a supervisory board, they would have said, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But then 13 years in a row, and it was the evaluations of people who attended the first workshops. Please get us more workshop. Now, well, you have to remember, we don't do that now. And why don't we? Well, this was before the internet. This was before cell phones. The information flow, an estimate was to take 10 years for an established medical procedure to be finally used on an everyday basis in a medical office. It takes psychology and education even longer. So we needed something done immediately. We got that done, and then we shift over to going together.
Did the suicide rate go down?
No, the suicide rate has continued. In fact, South Dakota has the 5th highest adolescent suicide rate in the nation, okay? And it has not gone down, but it has not gone up as much as it would have otherwise. And if you graph it out, you will see that the increase in suicide rate is directly related, it follows almost the exact same line as the increase in social communication. All of the social networking done on phones, all of that has, I can't say it caused it, but it has been exactly the same timing as the increase in adolescent depression and suicide rate. Many mental health people will tell you, some studies have shown that, many mental health people will tell you, if those things hadn't happened, we may have been able to keep it steady or bring it down. But it's like we're rowing in a boat very fast, but the current keeps getting stronger.
That's interesting.
So it's a good thing that we have some rows,
Yeah.
or we'd be wiped downstream.
Well, what do you have for a vision for the future?
Well, that's interesting to think about. I believe that with the innovation of technology and things like AI, the artificial intelligence, we're going to see tremendous changes. We're going to be able to guide therapy by AI, by having physiological measures of the human body when you're talking with people to know what kinds of changes occur. There's a man by the name of Dr. Gottman, and he can predict divorce rate extremely high, like at 99%, after taking a couple and putting them in an apartment for 2 or 3 days. But he has them hooked up to all of these different things to check their blood pressure and everything else. And what happens when they have arguments with each other, if these physiological measures are above a certain level, they're going to get divorced because basically they're killing each other because they have such a negative reaction. Well, we're going to have advances in that. What I'm hoping is that we'll also have advances in the humanness, that, okay, we can measure these things, we can do these things. Back in the 1970s, Nichols wrote a book called Megatrends. And he said that for every increase in technology, there needs to be another increase in humanness, okay? That even though we have better delivery procedures for babies, we have also an increase in birthing rooms and the human side of that. I don't know what the human side of AI will be. I'm very interested in what we do now. What is it that happens that will equate to the changes we can make with this phenomenal artificial intelligence, which would be so helpful in psychology and medicine. And I don't know what that is. I'd be very interested to watch, but it'll happen.
No,
Nichols has been right. It will happen.
You'll keep your eye on it for sure. Along your whole career path, Robert, you probably had a set of values. Could you list some of them that you've always kept that guide you in your career and your life?
You know, I've thought about that, particularly when you're in graduate school in psychology. You basically, are put into therapy through the process you're working on, looking at your own life. And a great deal of what I ended up doing was doing family genograms, taking a look at your family. And I was lucky enough to be born into a family of 11 children, hardworking parents, the seventh of 11. And many, many things I learned by experience because we needed to exist as a group, we needed to have individuality, and we needed to motivate each other. And some of the values that I've had, for example, are how you treat people fairly. There's a little saying about how do you divide a candy bar? Well, you let one cut it in half and the other gets first choice. Okay, and so following that, and I learned that before I went to school, okay, because this is what happens when you have siblings. And we had a very strong religious background. We're Finnish Lutheran. My parents came over from Finland, and so they had this strong worth ethic. And so that was a value. What my parents taught us, although they never said it, but what they taught us is that working hard is not a responsibility. It's a privilege. You have the privilege of going out, getting a job, doing something, and changing things. And those kinds of things were not taught in terms of verbal lessons, but you observed them, you watched, you saw what happened. And so those values, I think, brought over and were brought into my marriage. When I met my wife, I told her the next day I wanted to marry her. She was a little suspicious of that. But it took me 4 years to talk her into it. And it's been for a very long time, over half a century now, 56 years. And I think those values came into the marriage and then were just reinforced. Once you have that, once you live like that, then one continues to reinforce the other.
What about ethics then? You're in a field in the medical psychiatry field that ethics are a big part of the practice. What ethics did you feel you really needed to follow?
Well, there are a code of ethics, obviously, in terms of professional conduct, but if you take beyond that, then one of the things that you sometimes see happen is that people who work in the helping professions, and I'll take psychology in this case, once they're established and become well-known and have a large client list, they will only see people who can pay top dollar. Okay, and so Schofield wrote a book called Psychotherapy, The Purchase of a Friendship, ? Saying, wait a minute, the people who are dealing with the most difficult cases, the social workers at Department of Social Services, they're dealing with the most difficult people. They're the ones who have the least training. The most trained people, the psychoanalysts, are dealing with snake phobics in New York. Well, we don't have any snakes in New York unless you go to a zoo. So why are they doing that? Because it pays a lot of money. So that's something you can do. It's not unethical. There's no board of ethics that will say you have to take people, even if they don't have money, but I always have. And Title 19 or Medicare changed that. All of a sudden now, people who had very low income, no health insurance could get those services. So when I had my group practice, we always had a mandate. We would take Medicaid. We would take these services. We would take a percentage of our group would always be individuals who didn't have that. So that is one of the things that I think my family taught me, because we were a family that was a working family. We knew what it was like. I was actually turned away from a doctor's office once with a broken bone in my foot because my parents owed money. And the doctor said, look, I can't treat you because you already owe us too much money. So I remember it was in the winter, my father drove me there and we went back out to the car kind of limping along through the snow in Deadwood. And so I had that as a very personal kind of experience of, wait, how could this happen? And so when I went to practice, in fact, that's when I first started. I wanted to work in mental health centers and work there. So those are the ethical things. And like with the Hall of Fame, it has come back. It's come back to me in huge measure that, yes, that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, you've really made an impact, Robert. By the way, we were classmates in high school.
Yes,
I know
we
his
were.
wife well, and we grew up in the golden years in
The golden
Black
years
Hills.
of lead, yes.
Just a couple of last questions now. Can you talk about the role education plays in your success and anybody's success that's generally in the Hall of Fame?
In mine, it was everything. I had great mentors, Walter Higbee. When I went to the University of Iowa to get my doctorate, I worked with a man by the name of Dr. Owen Duffy. These people would spend extra time with you, showing you what to do. So there was education from the classroom and the books, but then the real world application. It's not only education that teaches you how to do things with other people, but changing yourself, challenging your own beliefs. Many of the things that you learn challenges some of the thoughts and ideas that you've had that maybe not. Maybe it is different. So trying to be a lifelong, my wife says, perpetual student, I open myself up to being educated not only in terms of things professionally, but just listening and watching around me and learning. And from that standpoint, in the recent years, what I've been the greatest source of my education has been my own grandkids.
What are you learning from your grandkids?
Well, my grandkids are teaching me that if you pay attention, like to their music, that originally I was like, don't turn that on. But if you listen to the lyrics, if you listen to what these songs are saying, they're saying it in a way that's hard for old ears to hear. But if you listen to it, there are phenomenally important messages. One group called AJR has a song, Turning Out. In the course of that song that says, I'm just turning out, you think I'm going to turn out fine, but I don't know. I'm only turning out. I'm just turning out now. And that's been an extremely popular song. And it's a plea from kids. If parents and other people listen, look, how am I going to turn out? Help me out here. And if you listen to the lyrics of these songs, these kids are extremely insightful, much more insightful than I was, maybe not you at that age, but much more insightful. And I've sat back and had a total appreciation, a different appreciation of looking at their culture.
That's a good insight.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Arnio, what was it like to be notified you were going to be in the Hall of Fame? And what does it mean to you?
Well, it's kind of surreal. When we were in a restaurant when I got the phone call, and we went in the parking lot, and we didn't start the car for a while, although it was very hot out. We just sort of looked at each other, my wife and I. But it's extremely gratifying. It means a tremendous amount. They're giving me some feedback that the things that I did, the decisions that I made, the changes that I've been only one part of, a whole group, we're holding hands, come about, have been recognized and worthwhile. And more than that, if I can do it, so can other people. And that the Hall of Fame has recognized these things, not getting caught up in a time of extreme conflict in our society, that the Hall of Fame just stays above the fray and says, no, we're going to do these things. And so other people also have an opportunity. It's phenomenal.
Well, I want to congratulate you. You are very deserving the
Well, thank
way
you.
that you've changed the culture of South Dakota.
Thank you. I've
So
been very
welcome
lucky.
to the Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Thank you very much.